Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. Hello and welcome to another podcast with Harvesting Wisdom. I'm your host, Mike McMahon. Today's guest is Dr. Sharon Hall from ASU, and she is on board with us now. Thank you, Sharon, for joining us. Good to see you.
Hi there.
Hey.
Thanks for the invitation.
Sharon, tell me a little about, or tell the audience that's listening a little about yourself, your journey. You right now are the Associate Dean of the Life Sciences. So I'll ask a bunch of questions about that, but how did you get to where you are right now?
So I'm a conservation scientist, and my field of research is to study the health and resilience of ecosystems. And so when I say ecosystems, I'm talking about the homes for the 8 billion of us humans, plus all the millions of other species that share our community of life. And I really love studying ecosystems because it's this level of understanding the world that includes people, but also animals and the soil and the atmosphere and everything that the earth is putting together to create life. And understanding that together helps me think about the world in a complex way, but also trying to understand the simple ways to understand the how ecosystems work. And so ecosystems are really complex, but there are ways to see the entire picture and understand it much better.
Okay, so were you as a kid growing up an avid reader, and you read a bunch of
Yeah,
E.O.
so my
Wilson,
background.
or what did you do? Or were you outside all the time
No,
digging up
no.
worms?
Yeah, so that's the traditional story, and I think that that's what's it's interesting because just first of all, if we want to rebuild the human nature connection, which I think is broken now, and it's one of the sources of problems that we have on this planet. If we want to rebuild this human nature connection, we have to think about broadening the tent to get to all types of people who might have a passion for this. So I grew up in the urban flats of Oakland, California. I'm a biracial person from an immigrant family, and my family didn't go out into the outdoors very much. So traditionally, when you think about a conservationist, oftentimes you hear a story of, hey, I grew up in the woods behind my house and I caught frogs and, I was outdoors all the time. That wasn't my journey. And what's, I think, really important here is that there are millions and billions of people out there who have this affinity to nature, whether it's urban nature, whether it's their pets in their homes, whether it's some experience that they have, whether it's seeing a film on TV, or whether it's hearing a podcast like this. And suddenly we feel like, oh my gosh, I've found what I'm super passionate about. And that's what's exciting, is that there's many pathways into being a conservationist and wanting to help to save the planet. And being an outdoors person as a young person isn't the only way in there.
You're in Oakland. You grew up there. You went to grade school there. You went to high school there. Where'd you go to college?
Yeah, Oakland Public Schools. I was lucky to go, so I was Oakland Public Schools growing up, and then I was lucky to go to my first private school at Stanford as an undergraduate. So it was just down the road from where I grew up. It was a really, really different experience for me. My high school was really big, very diverse. And what's interesting along my environmental science or conservation science journey is that as I've gotten and continued on in this field, I think the demographics of who's an environmentalist and who's a conservationist have gotten more narrow. And it was always really confusing to me because none of what we want to do, I mean, what we want to do as humans is to help humans survive on this planet and also bring along all the other animals and plants and microbes that are in our community along with us. And it struck me as odd because this is the most human of passions and professions, yet the field somehow was much more narrow, at least how I was exposed to it in the US and during the time that I was growing up in California.
Okay,
So
so you went.
part of my passion now is to broaden this tent to say like, wow, it doesn't really matter who you are. And in fact, it's your lived experience that might have some different ideas because we're not doing a great job here in
Right, nobody's
solving
winning.
the problems of the planet. Right. And so I think by including more ideas and people with different types of experiences, it's only going to help us.
Okay, when you started at Stanford, what did you want? Did you want to be like an astronaut or the president
Yeah.
or did you always know you wanted to be doing this? So at what point did you kind of transition into it?
I think this may be a bit of a common journey as well, is that coming from immigrant family, um, my options or what I was encouraged to do was financially secure, engineering, medicine, some of these traditional backgrounds, because I didn't and my family didn't have an idea of who an environmental science professor or a conservationist or a sustainability professional, that those words weren't really common in my community. And if they were, the the ideas conjured some type of person who was working for free, who
Yeah.
was, um, camping all the time, or it could be on the other side, could be someone who had some means and was, a ski bum and out in nature. So the way that I perceived this field, well, I didn't. I just didn't know. And my connection was to my animals, my dog in my house. And it sounds funny as an entry that way, but it was that connection to something that I felt this really deep kinship to this other non-human being.
Yeah.
And I think that going through and following a pre-med path in college, it just became very clear to me that, yeah, I was a human, but I didn't find that passion. And there were key moments, and there were some key moments, as I look back in my background where I was exposed to nature. And then a couple of key things happened in college, and it was just like poof, like when you
So as a
find your
pre-med, you did a
passion,
lot of
it's like,
biology,
I did.
right? Organic biology, organic, and then you also
Organic
did
chemistry.
little chemistry and some all of that stuff, which is a very straight and narrow path. But what's kind of cool is when you're able to pull away years later, even whenever it may be, and actually use some of the things that you never knew you were going to use or thought, and all of a sudden they become, because like you said, life, most of life is in the water, or it's in the soil at a microscopic level, right? That's how we seed bank. That's where life sits.
Mhm.
And then from there, what we see above ground at our in our vision, not at the microscopic vision, is not as much as that is underground, right? So having
Mhm.
that background doesn't hurt. That's for sure. But so okay, so pre med, you decided medicine wasn't for you at some point, and then you went on to get a master's, then a PhD, or went straight to a PhD program that was all of the above.
Yeah, I had an experience when I was in college, which is flavored the way that I see pathways and what I'm trying to build at Arizona State University is these experiences, these immersive experiences. They're so transformative. I mean, I was on a path. I studied really hard as a student. I tried to do all the right things, and then just like a left turn, and then something else just is happening, and I realized, wow, there's this other thing that's possible. I had an opportunity to study at a marine station and do some diving in the Monterey Bay,
Ah,
and
okay,
it
got it.
was absolutely life changing. But it wasn't just the being in the ocean, which was immersive and incredible. I mean, that was incredible to do that, but it was the community around that experience. It was a community of learners who was excited about ocean conservation. There were scientists as well as ocean conservationists, as well as the entire community around the California coast who was so ardently protective of the ocean. And it was immersing in that holistic way of looking at a conservation problem that just made me realize there's a future for me. There's a job for me. I could probably convince my parents that
Yeah.
being in environmental
That's
science is not going to break the bank.
right. Yeah, I did. When I had my kids, I was raising my daughter, and when she gave up skiing, because I thought she legitimately was an Olympic hopeful, and my son gave up on rowing. That was my focus with him. I was never pushing, and instead I got one that's a doctor and one that's an engineer, and I didn't
Oh,
ask for either.
congratulations.
You know what I mean? And I was just the opposite. She graduated from medical school, and she had her entire team with her, and all the educators. And she looked me in the face and said, "See, I'm a doctor. You just wanted me to be a skier." And I said in front of everybody, I said, "Yeah, there's a million doctors out there. There's only a handful of Olympic skiers." And all of them laughed and thought it was funny. But the whole point is you finally got to a point where you could pick a direction. I think it's kind of crazy, but we indoctrinate kids at an elementary school and a high school. I think for the most part we burn out students rather than develop a sense of curiosity or work with them to make choices for themselves. You can't have everybody be a doctor or a lawyer, and everybody's not suited for that either. So, okay, so you went
Yeah,
from
but can I make a
Stanford.
comment on that though? What you're saying
Sure.
is more true now than ever. It's that um, students, young people are learning in very different ways. They're accessing
Oh
knowledge
yeah.
and manipulating knowledge in 100% different way than what you and I did. And what that's driving us to see is that, first of all, young people are, and we've always been this way. It was just, I think we weren't allowed to say, we have some ideas too. Maybe we could do this another way. It was like, here are the professors or your teachers. They had the knowledge. You are an empty vessel. We're going to fill your head and you're just going to learn stuff. And then what happens is that you replicate the previous generation just over and over and over. And like, what a
Right.
surprise, because in fact, you're not asking young people what they want and what change do they want to be in the world.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do really differently in the College of Global Futures, especially. We know that the problems of the world are so urgent. I mean, tens of years, right? That we're thinking that their migration is going to change, weather patterns are changing, agricultural strategies are going to have to adapt, biodiversity is going to be moving around in different ecosystems into our cities, all sorts of things. We know this is happening. And if we continue to say, well, you need to learn all this stuff, and then later you then try to make a difference, well, that's just too
It's too
slow.
late. They didn't learn that
It's
skill
just
set, right?
no. And then also, like, you think about it, about what we're learning on the job, that there's some things, yes, like you need to know, let's say, how soil biogeochemistry works in order to develop technological solutions to, I don't know, over fertilization. Yeah, there's like all sorts of things that you could learn in that, but why can't it be more on demand? Like, you
Yeah.
realize there's a problem in the world, you can help students be a part of the solution, and they will start to, I mean, the curiosity, they're going to start to ask and demand and say, well, what about this and what about this? And then suddenly they're driving their own learning, and they're getting job ready skills at a much younger age. They're feeling really empowered to get up and say, hey, I'm a part of this society. I've got some civic responsibility here to be a part of the solution. And all of that, I think, is a much better way to educate learners than I think that I mean, we did okay, but I just think that it was a different world back then.
So the scientific process is the accredited process. If you want to write an article, if you want to move forward, not the most fun stuff to read through because it's hard to really. I've never gotten a straight a conclusion from any scientific article I've ever read. There's never a conclusion. It's like, well, this, that, or that, because it's a matter of isolation and looking at isolated variables, which is how we
Right.
got into chemistry and as a solution, and biology, how we manipulate it and control it, and completely different from a regenerative process or a circular process, which is what when I went to school and I have a degree in environmental design from years and years ago. and we called it the holistic problem solving process. And so a lot of what we do has unintended consequences. I'm trying to wrap up like 5 different books that I've been writing, and I wanted to name it unintended consequences, but everybody around me is like, that's negative. You can't say that. But it's true, right? Everything we do, we come up with a better way to fertilize, right? It's supposedly better. Then we realize there's unintended consequences. So, but let's finish with the career path. Okay, now you're
Yeah.
out of Stanford. You went to You
Yeah.
had the epiphany in the Monterey Bay. You could pretty much anybody on the planet's going to have an epiphany there. You go in that water. I mean, it's a great place, right? So
It's incredible.
But you got it, and you're like, I don't want to spend all my time working in a particular lab right now. Although you might go back to that if you had a focus on one particular thing you wanted to work on. But what happened after that? Where did you go for your post-grad work?
So during the time I was in Monterey, I was so lucky to be a part of the Monterey Bay Aquarium community. I don't know, have you visited that? So
Yeah, oh,
there are
yeah.
these institutions, right? There are these like informal science education institutions or museums and aquaria that are out there, and they do this incredible job because they're immersing visitors into something that is experiential and most importantly, super fun. And
Yeah.
it's like awe-inducing, right? And so I
Yeah.
got to work at the education department there. There's a sister institution called the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, which is a deep sea exploration organization. And they were piping in for the first time images from the deep sea. Like these are species that no one had ever seen before, piping it into the auditorium. And I was up there as a 20 something, like, talking to the scientists over the live link and interpreting what we were seeing for visitors. And I think working at that level in science communication or education helped me realize that there was a huge gap, I think, in what the public understood about what science was, what is underneath, right offshore, for example. And I wanted to fill that gap to show folks like how amazing the environment was and why it was so important to conserve it, and what it was that we were doing in our everyday lives, just going about our everyday business, how that could contribute unintentionally to some of these negative consequences that no one wants. But it was this kind of gap in education. So I went on to a master's in education at Harvard. It was a 1.5-year program. I got my teaching credential at the same time
Oh,
and
that's
taught high
great.
school for a bit. And it helped me at that stage stay broad enough to understand the why, because I was still having this awakening of how I could be useful in the world. And I thought at that level, I have a passion for communicating science and communicating about nature's talents that I wanted to stay very broad. So I went on, got my master's, taught high school, did outdoor education in Colorado for adults and all ages of learners. And but then I had another epiphany. It made me realize that I was talking so much about science, but I didn't really understand science. Like I wanted to advocate for more sustainable agricultural practices, let's say, like, right along the Monterey Bay and strawberry fields, all around, the agriculture in California. And I didn't know enough to be able to say, here's some solutions, not just like, here's this problem. Like I just got tired of talking about the problem because it was just kind of a sad story and a depressing story. I wanted to help people say like, here's what I could do to help fix some of these things, either locally or with my community, or I could work with my decision makers in government. And so I needed to go back and get a degree in science. And I wanted to know more about these problems in a much deeper way so I could then be the advocate for more intelligent design in how we look at our food systems or we look at our energy systems. And so
Okay.
I felt like I had to get more education, and I did that.
And where did you do that?
I went back to after I was on the East Coast. East Coast was a little bit weird for a West Coaster.
Yeah. You're either born for the East.
Just
I was born on the East, but I'm not born for the East. That's why I'm here in Arizona. But you're either
yeah,
born
it's
for
just
the
a
East or born
totally
for the West.
okay. So I must be born for the West because it's my home. I went back to California and I got my degree in environmental science, policy and management, and also some soils at UC Berkeley.
Oh, okay. That gives us your history and your journey. And then you started teaching with that immediately, and you've been teaching ever since? Or did you work
Yeah,
in any other?
yeah. So after I got my degree, I have a right. So now I've got teaching. I was communicating with the public. I've got some science education, and I thought, what better place to put that together than in an immersive college atmosphere where I could teach out in nature, doing the science and teaching together. So for 5 years, I was at the Colorado College, which is in Colorado Springs. It's a really cool institution because
Yeah.
students take one class at a time, and it's intended to be immersive in the liberal arts tradition. So fully holistic, thinking about all the interdisciplinary pathways into a problem and trying to solve that problem. And so I did that for 5 years. It was fantastic as a young professor to learn how to teach immersively. It made me understand that this is the pathway to a transformative education. And I've been aiming to bring that into a very different atmosphere at ASU. And I transitioned to ASU because as transformative as the education was even for myself at Colorado College, being a young professor, the problems of the world are so urgent now that I needed to scale my message. I needed to scale the inclusion of other types of people and other types of ideas. I wanted to get bigger and to get to more people. And so I came to the institution that does this better than any place in the world, and that's Arizona State University. We're a large institution where our number one mission is access. And I really resonated with that mission of helping any learner around the world to be part of a solution to a problem that they might see locally in their community or regionally. They want to be part of that solution. This is a pathway for them to get there. And
Yeah.
it just resonated with me. And so I came to ASU to do that.
What I find cool, and I share alignment with you, is number one, I've had lots of classes in school. Getting my master's degree at ASU took forever because I was paying my own way through one class at a time, moving in a lot of different directions. I think I got 80 credit. I have more credit hours for a master's degree than any other person. So that either makes me the dumbest or at least I have a little variety of what I took. Talk about being interpersonal. I'm interpersonal myself. But the one thing I can say is that it's really hard to take classes with PhDs or even communicate with the PhDs that never got a degree in teaching. So some of the best PhDs I had calculus. I hated it. I took a class, failed it, took it again, it was like the long, hard road to get what I needed to do. But what I remembered is one mathematician, and he loved math. I was like, who loves math? First guy, I was like, okay, if you can talk to me from a point of passion, I'll listen to you. And then it turns out that he had a master's in education as well, and he could literally teach. So that's kind of cool. So with what you're doing, you're more in the teaching part. You're not sitting in a lab doing research, or do you have to do a little of both? Do you have to write papers as well?
Yeah. Okay.
You have to
So
publish
what
a
you're
little?
saying is true, right? Like you want really good teachers because it's their passion that's just infectious. And all of us have experienced this. There's those
Right.
mentors and teachers that have changed our lives. But also, learners know when something is canned or you're creating a scenario to teach. I'm not saying that's wrong. There are scenarios under which that really works. But also, you have to recall that I came into this discipline understanding that there are some real problems with the environment that need to be solved. And so just teaching about it has just never been enough. So I've been developing a research program focused on resilience of ecosystems, including the animals and the people within those ecosystems, how to help ecosystems bounce back from environmental stressors or human stressors. And I think it's the combination of doing real world impactful science combined with teaching. I think that is just a spark because, again, you're bringing learners on to be a part of real solutions. And it's not just a kind of a lab experiment that you're putting together to teach a concept. You're saying, like, get on board because the train's leaving and we're going to go solve something. And they may not understand fully that the newer learners what exactly the problem is or how to do a scientific research project, but by the end they do. And so it's in some ways it's like a little bit of backward learning where you're onboarding people, you're helping them to be a part of the experiment, developing solutions, learning how to do all the talking to farmers out in the field. And then later, when they're getting their degree, they're like, oh my gosh, wow, I just learned all this, but it's not like they created the thing at the beginning and then went and then did it. It's just like, you're on board, come along, let's go.
And I love you're calling them learners. That's what students are called in Africa. They call them learners. I thought, that's better than student, because I don't know the root. I haven't looked up the root word student, what that even means. But a learner, it resonates pretty quickly. It is kind of interesting. There's an old Buckminster Fuller, I'm going to paraphrase a quote, that there are no teachers and there are no students. There's just give a person a tool and they'll learn on their own. And that's more or less what you're doing, is giving them access to things that pique their curiosity, but also something they can tangibly work with to do what they're doing. The other thing was kind of interesting about what you said is at Colorado, when you went to Colorado, they did one class at a time. I remember, because I was always trying to catch up on my grades, I had to go to summer school all the time. And I thought that in the 3 or 4 weeks, I'd take one class at summer school, I'd learn more about that than I did taking an entire semester when I'm trying to balance 6 classes at a time or whatever. So it's an interesting way, but it kind of curious to see your path, because you started traditional, like all parents, like this is what we want you to do, and then you got the spark in a natural environment, which is the ocean. Your next spark was when you were in Colorado. Everything is outdoors in Colorado, right? So you kind of kept going from one place to another, and traveling doesn't hurt, even though you didn't necessarily, love that East Coast because you didn't grow up with that culture. The fact that you exposed it. Now, in your work, how much world travel are you doing? Are you staying kind of put where you are with your students and what you do, or are you going to different environments worldwide?
Yeah, no, I've tried to do a bit of both, and here's why. So there are the problems that you oftentimes see as like big biodiversity problems. They're with these charismatic megafauna like tigers in India or Nepal, right? And so these are problems that are affecting so many people and these very charismatic creatures. I had an experience as a postdoc um, right after my PhD. I had a colleague who was working out in the rainforests of Borneo,
Okay,
and it was an opportunity to do a bunch of science on how rainforests work and how they react to burning and being deforested for palm oil, which is
that's one
a
of those
very
deals. Yeah,
large industrial crops, right?
yeah,
And for me, I was there to do the science, but also I realized that these are the problems that are so deep in my heart. Because I mean, you go out to those forests and you see orangutans in the trees and you realize, as they're looking down at you, these are our closest kin. And their homes are
Mm,
burning down around us. And
right,
we in the US are a central part of this problem because of the products that we're buying.
sure.
And it just became super clear to me at that point in this remote situation where I had to work with partners very closely because of the language, because of the culture and everything, that I was a very small speck in a much bigger problem. And I wanted to fight this with everything that I had, but I realized that it's not about me. It is just not about me. If I can bring something to facilitate the in-country partners to do something that's going to be better for not only the people, but the animals and the rainforest and the homes that they are from, then I needed to be a part of that solution. But it just wasn't about me and my science and my, US education, none of that. So I
Right.
think working in a developing world context, in a outside the US context, was so humbling that, again,
Yeah.
transformed me forever to do a different kind of work. Now, at the same time, doing that work is so hard because, again, language, travel, you got to bring big equipment out there.
I
There's
agree.
just, and it's a lot of heartache. It's just like, these are serious problems that are affecting lots of people who just are very vulnerable. At the same time that I wanted to do that work, because I thought it was, it is important. At this, in my own backyard, there are things that are happening all the time
Yeah.
that need also some help. And so we've been working with the National Wildlife Federation, thinking about rewilding our cities. And I mean, I'm doing this in my own garden. I'm trying to make my garden. I ripped out the grass and put in a bunch of pollinator plants, and are having this relationship, this conversation daily with the deer and the plants about growing and how to attract pollinators to rewild this landscape to be less environmentally problematic. And what I realize in that relationship that I'm having with my own garden, that there are folks all around in neighborhoods across the Phoenix Valley, across the US, who are also curious. They're interested in birds. They're realizing that pollinators are having issues. How about like working it in my own backyard to try and facilitate the work that all those folks are doing, including, again, yourself with this podcast, that are doing to try to raise awareness of being more in touch, reweaving nature into the fabric of humanity. We can do that at home as well as abroad.
Yeah. So the old slogan back 40 years ago was "Think global, act local, think global," whatever. And that there is some truth to that. Sometimes we do try to appropriate cultures. We go to a place and say, "Well, we know this" or whatever, and it doesn't quite work that way. It's the same thing with it. You're teaching. If you're forcing someone to do something they don't really care about, it's just not going to work. And I think what you're saying is important because our slogan, one of our slogans at Urban Farming Education is that we want to bridge the gap between awareness and action. We're involved pretty heavily with the Climate Reality Project. We go to Mongolia in a couple of weeks. We'll podcast out of there. We'll talk to the people who are involved. But I look at that, and I'm not going to say I get skeptical, but I think my approach is that there is no environmental problem. There's a social problem, right? And how do you handle social problems? You do it through education primarily for the people who could possibly be listening. People at my age don't listen anymore. So if you can start working with kids at that preschool to high school, and they're brought through a process where they've learned to be critical thinkers and they're interested in other things, they can do it. So with you right now in your classwork, are you undergrad or are you grad or both? Are you working with variety of different students then?
All of the above. So I am teaching, and that's what's so fun. It's so fun. And for any of those listeners out there who are thinking about pathways, being in a university is a gift because it is like we're always in school. We're still in school,
It can
and
be a
because
gift or a curse, right? So depends on the school.
That's right. But being a professor, we are a part of the lives of the students and their families, and we're seeing how interests are changing and the way people are learning are changing. And so I really enjoy teaching freshmen, like, first year students. Now at ASU, it's a bit different because it's not necessarily your traditional 19-year-old first year student. We've got learners from around the world who are entering into school again, potentially as adults. A lot of our first year learners are working parents, for example. But
Sure.
it's, as someone who, like, you say this about yourself too, like, you're curious, you just want to learn about the world and what people are doing. And as a teacher in a university, it's a privilege to listen to the stories. And oftentimes, we're on video, so I'm seeing the lives of these students, of these learners, and it's again so humbling. So I have first year students. I teach a intro to conservation class for first years. Why should we care about nature? What is it? What is important, and how do we do it? And also, what are the types of pathways you can get into saving nature? So students don't have to go through the whole pathway of thinking they want to go to medicine and then realizing a little bit late
Sure.
that they want to save nature. But I also work with graduate students, and this is also fascinating because once you get an undergrad education or you've got some certificates, oftentimes you want to learn more, but you've got the skills, the life skills, you've got some focus on how you want to make a difference. And my goal as a guide to get students connected to partners out in the world who are doing that kind of work to help them get funded to do it. So I'm
Yeah.
working with graduate students as well.
And this is a hard pitch to parents, probably as much as to students. Students want to go to a school and then get a job right away. That, to me, that's vocational. And I did a stint over at the community college where I was teaching, and I kind of watched the same thing. It shocked me. I think 10% or more of the students were homeless, categorized as homeless in our community college. And so where did that come from, right? And all students have, the priority of it for all of us is an outcome. We want a piece of paper, and we might want a job. The thing about this is that I believe is that we want fulfillment in our lives. Part of fulfillment is being able to, pay for rent and a car, and if you want a family, whatever you want to do, to have income, right? So that is part of the deal. But also just working a job that you never really liked or cared about is not going to give you that. And I think sometimes with the students like myself or the students that you're teaching with, you circle back years and years later to what you actually cared about the whole time. But you were in this little bubble for 20 or 30 years raising kids and doing the money grab that our society has designed us to do. And then you have the ability to do something else. And for me, we started a community garden in downtown Phoenix on Central and Indian schools, 17 acres.
Amazing.
I didn't want to do it for that reason. I was trying to do, for my landscape company, I was trying to do a nursery. And so I got contacted by the owner. Hey, do you want to use the property? Found out there was all kinds of zoning issues. So I was forced to do a community garden. I didn't even know what it was. Neither did anybody at the city of Phoenix, by the way. They had it on the books. So I did this community garden, which meant I had to involve community somehow. I had no idea what that was about. But so we had a lot of nonprofits, from Project Roots to, Native Americans working in a section, or Afro-Americans doing a section, people from all over the world doing different schools, doing a plot of gardening. Some of them knew what they were doing, some did not, so we kind of helped them. But we also we had a community space, a large community space that was set up for events. So we did yoga, and we did fundraising events for all these nonprofits. And that's kind of gave me this awareness of, things in the world aren't all that good, right? And so if you think that you have a career and that you're smart or you're good in your career, it's almost, and then people retire. They retire at whatever, 60, 65. And what do? Go play golf or drink or play cards. They're not really equipped to do anything else. And the idea is use these skill sets that you develop your whole life to be able to do something that can actually bring you fulfillment. And I say it all the time is once you become aware of something, you can once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now you're kind of obligated, to face those challenges. So it's great to see what you've got going with your students. We have a bunch of things in our program that kind of align with what you're talking about, but one is an ecotourism to Zimbabwe. Our partner over there runs the Run Wild safaris in all of Zimbabwe. So the students go. It's a 2-week, and it's cheap compared to your traditional go to Europe and look at the old buildings, which were copies of buildings from 2,000 years earlier, and go and eat these particular foods or do these things. This one, you go into Bulawayo, and you stay in Bulawayo, and we go to the Museum of Life Science, which is an old museum there, and every animal, every bug, every insect has been stuffed. So before you go on safari, you get to look at everything as the way it looks, but it then gives kind of the history of the geology of the immigration pattern and the history of that part of the world. There's also 2 ruins from several hundred years ago that you can visit while you're in Bulawayo. And then there's a great shop where you can buy much better safari gear than you can buy anywhere for like pennies on the dollar. Get shirts
Wow.
made for nothing. So that's part of the Bulawayo experience. And we allow people, that gives you some time to get over a little jet lag. But then we take them to one safari that is where my friend who owns half of the safari, he and his brother, his family has 2 25,000-acre pieces, and then they have a 50,000-acre piece that they turned into a conservation area. Nobody knows about it, so it's 100,000 acres, and if you've never seen it, they're rewilding animals. And they've brought in a little bit of industrial agriculture, but we're also working with the village people who live in the community to help them learn how to do things to avoid climate problems, right? And these are things that skipped about 150 years. If you go back before the Industrial Revolution, everybody knew about composting. Everybody knew about mulching, rotation of crops, crop selection. We knew these things, right? In Arizona, they directed water. The Hohokams did over 1,000 years ago. And now we think that, we're the ones who created it. But there's a lot of issues in Africa. There's issues of energy. In that part of the world, they deserve energy like anyone else. If you go to Malawi, where we're at, it's got the lowest carbon footprint of any humans on the planet. Yet, they're paying the price because they can't grow their own crops because of climate change. So some cool things, but it's a great opportunity for students and for you, by the way, as a professor, to see something at a massive scale that these people don't even announce. They've never said anything to anybody about it. I want to bring students over there because students take those cell phones and all those stupid selfies and all, and they can bring awareness to what's going on over there. And I think, with our education platform, but it's important at your level too. You got the Gen Z people that are, I don't know if you've read the book Stolen Focus or anything that talks about the effects of social media and how it's even further separating people from their environment. And so there's a lot going on. But again, if you look at it from that standpoint, the environment is a social problem. It's not an environment. The world would do just fine if we left. It's going to go through its cycles. It's going to do things. The question is how much are we accelerating the problem and how do we fix it? I'd be curious on another discussion with you to see what your thoughts of those macro geotechnical solutions. Is that worth playing with? Or I think we got to exhaust some of the small stuff first, right?
It has to happen. I think that we're past this point of being able to voluntarily reduce our emissions. But humans are humans. I think that, it's hard to, I think part of the sustainability problem that we've had, honestly, is that we've put the onus on the individual to do something in our own lives.
Yeah.
Eat less beef, drive less, get an electric car, all these things.
Yeah.
But the problems are systemic. It's not just about what we are doing. Our choice options are narrow. It's just like this false dichotomy of like whether we, like we can buy this or this. Well, it's like, because in fact, there's a whole world of possibility. It's just that we're within this system that's really hard to change.
And it's
I think
easy
that's
to
really
vilify,
important.
right? You vilify
It
the oil
is.
industry, but the truth is
Or each other.
we're all part of the oil industry. Everything we have is made of oil. Everything we eat.
And how are you going to get to work, right?
Right.
How are you going to buy an electric car to get to work? You're just trying to make a living.
So it really is
I
about
think
solutions and trying to come up with and you have to have a different approach, which is great with what you're doing with your students is you're trying to say, think out of the box. So far, nobody's really come up with the greatest ideas. So maybe you'll be the one to do that, if you're
Well,
exposed,
it's going to
you
be
know?
some geotechnological solutions. It's going to be about communities standing up and saying and electing officials who listen and will care about their problems. I think it's all
We,
of those things. And I think the danger is to get so disenfranchised from the democratic process that you feel like that you don't matter. And then you
right,
just
right,
kind
right.
of disengage. and then how? How are we going to make a difference if people are disengaged? I think we need the opposite. We need to have everyone feel like they matter and that they can be a part of this solution. But first we need some models of that. And
Yeah,
honestly, like at the largest scale in our country, it's really challenging. I think that these systems are um they're challenging. And I think at the local level, that's when people feel like, wow, I can look at my neighbor and make a difference there. I can go to that community garden and grow something and, feed a few other people on my block. Then if we can know how to organize and honestly just trust each other, trust our
right, right.
institutions,
Well,
then I
once you
think we
know
can make
about
a
it, that's the
difference.
first thing. And that's a
Yeah,
big part.
agreed.
But the interesting thing we've got coming up in March, we haven't really fully announced it, but we are doing a environmental film festival, a documentary film festival, and it's going to be part of it is held at ASU. We've pretty much got that close to being secured. It's in Mesa and in Phoenix using the Metro light rail, and
Fantastic.
we've got some really great documentaries and some great filmmakers that talk about regenerative farming, and they're believers in it. What I do with one of the companies I have is soil amendments. So we do organic soil because I believe that we can save the soil. So anytime your students want to come out and look at we have big facilities where we compost, where we have worms in a building as big as an ASU building that's filled with nothing but worms. So we do worm composting, but then we do different blends, and we've got drought blends that can save 40% of water for crops. There's a lot of
Great
different
work.
things. Well, you just got, it's a matter of bringing people out to see it and understand that it's out there. And because we have to you're a teacher, we got to be optimistic about what we can do. And
That's
I
right.
think, a big part of it. So love to talk to you more about all of this. And,
Yeah.
any of your students that want to look at what we're doing or have some fun, the 2 weeks trip in Zimbabwe, I guarantee is a life changer.
That sounds like it.
It's amazing. So, anybody who wants to do that, if you want to come as well, we got quite a few groups coming, but it kind of seems like it fits into what pathway you've decided to walk on. So,
Well, it's so great to learn about what other folks are doing. We're at ASU, we're so big, we're moving fast, as you know, number one in innovation, 10 years running. So
right.
we're moving really fast. And so it's nice to find out what other people are doing in the community and
Well,
how
we
we
all
can think
build
about how
on
to
other
link up.
people's, yeah, we build
That's
on other
right.
people's shoulders. So
Yeah.
if you're not watching what's happening, trying to reinvent the wheel that's never worked, right? So, but
Yeah.
hey, Dr. Hall, I appreciate you being here today. I've probably overgone them. They're trying to give me the hook here. So I'll definitely stay in touch with you. Joe or Maria can, stay in touch with you, and appreciate you being here today and sharing your story with us.
Thank you. What a pleasure.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.